big one. But it's not just a couple.
Good evening, everyone. To start the official proceedings, I would like to acknowledge that we are meeting on Jarrah country, which the members and elders of the Jarrah community and their forebears have been custodians for many centuries and have performed age-old ceremonies of celebration, initiation and renewal. We acknowledge their living culture and their unique role in the life of this region. Council meetings are audio and video recorded and are made available to the public via electronic media, including YouTube. We have a camera in here that will only be used to film when we hand over an acknowledgement to Harriet O'Shea Carey, I hope I've got that right, for the work that she has done in representing our youth at the UN. Then it will be switched off. It's not here to get your faces or anything else, it's just for that section. So, all councillors present, thank you. Declarations of interest, conflicts of interest. Councillor Lesser.
Yes, I've got the one confidential.
Councillor Lesser, can you?
Sorry, yes. On item number 14, with page 72, the confidential report. The conflict there.
Thank you. Okay, so before I... Thank you. Sorry?
Conflict? Close association.
Yeah, sorry.
Close association.
Yeah, close association with one of the applicants.
Thank you. Minutes of the ordinary meeting of council, September the 17th.
Yes, I approve those minutes. There were some minor clerical errors that have been communicated to governance.
Thank you. So you're proposing the a motion as recommended.
Yep. Yes, I am. Mayor, that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the Mount Alexander Shire Council held on the 17th of September 2019 be confirmed.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that, but does that have to have the correction in the motion? Just a procedural question.
Could I have some advice on that?
Yes, please. Yeah.
So it needs to have it recorded that Councillor Petrusma was at our last meeting.
Yes.
That's the change.
Okay, so I'm happy to second that motion with me being present.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay, any problems? That being the case, I declare that motion carried. Did you get that change? Thank you. Before we come to the acknowledgement of the great work that Harriet's done, I've got a few other little announcements to make. This is my last meeting as the Mayor. I have to keep saying that. As the Mayor, I've become an ordinary councillor. At the next November meeting, Council will elect its next Mayor. I'd like to take this opportunity to say it's been a fabulous gig, and the gig has been fabulous because this community is absolutely rich. Just hang on a second. Can I just check whether you're allowed to film? Is there anyone else allowed to film?
No.
Sorry about that. Sorry. So I'd just like to say that, it's been a fabulous gig because of the people in this community, because of my fellow councillors, and just going around the table. Councillor Lesser, who's fairly new, has brought a different perspective, which sometimes we've struggled to understand, but when we've understood it, it's been a really, really good addition to our thinking. Councillor Cordy brings his long history here, really passionate supporter for farmers, and brings a really good, solid engineering approach to a whole lot of things. It's just good, plain and sensible. Councillor Henderson, wow, what a history you've got, what a dedication to your community. And I really appreciate the fact that your PhD in physics really brings that high focus on evidence and making sure we've got the right evidence. Councillor Neiman, sorry? I can think of a thing to say. You very rarely speak a lot, but you summarise into 2 short sentences wisdom that I speak in about 50 sentences and still don't get to your wisdom. Thank you very much, Councillor Gardner. You have actually brought such a really good, clear idea about governance, a passion for your community, and real clarity again. I really appreciate it. And Councillor Petrusma, you and I probably disagree most, and I really value that. I think it's fabulous. You bring that absolutely different view than I have, and I need to be stretched. I really appreciate it, as well as your dedication and working in all the community. Every single councillor here is so proud of the community they represent, and they do it fabulously. For the officers, I'd like to say it's been such a pleasure working with you. I've seen so many changes. On the infrastructure side, we have really got our planning together. Our contract management is really superb. On the sort of the human side of things, the partnerships we are entering into with all the other community organisations, we're just about to really take off on a whole lot of equity issues. That is just delivering so much better than we ever have, and I really, really appreciate that. And working with the Chief has just been a really great experience. He has brought to this a dedication to making sure that it is the councillors who lead this organisation, and that's really appreciated. So that was my thank you to everyone. I wish the next mayor, whoever he or she is, great joy of this wonderful community. I have one other thank you to say before we speak with Harriet, and that is, came to my knowledge that Moores, the Mount Alexander Animal Welfare Society, had a change of leadership at their last AGM, and I'd like to thank Brian Hayden and Stephanie Miller in particular, as well as the rest of the committee, for the amazing work they have done in getting from an almost failing institution to something that is now incredible. That is innovation, dedication at its best, and I wish the new committee a really good continuation on that, and as council I'm sure we continue to look forward to speaking with them. So we now move back onto the agenda, and thank you for that indulgence. Harriet, would you like to come to the front? Thank you. Sorry, Harriet. Come down this way. I'm sorry. Oh, so good to see you.
You too.
Harriet, you went and represented Australia at the UN. Were you the only Australian to do that as a young Australian?
No, there were a couple other Australians there. The only one anywhere around here, I think. And definitely one of the youngest, or the youngest. But it was such an incredible opportunity. I appreciate it so much, and I'm so happy that you nominated me for this. And yeah, it was such an incredible thing to be a part of.
So can you tell our people what happened? What was it?
Yeah, the UN Youth Climate Summit was basically an opportunity for young people from all around the world to come together. And people that are just so different in every way, except one similarity, one common interest is that we are all really passionate about climate action, and we are all seeing the catastrophic effects of the climate emergency on our lives. And so I got to meet people from all around the world who were affected by climate change in such a broad variety of different ways. Then we tried to come up with some innovative and creative ideas to address aspects of climate change, because as such a massive problem that affects people in just so many different ways, it's really important that we have more than just one solution. We need so many different things. So it was about talking about all the the little things and all the different ways we can address all those like millions of different little things that contribute to climate change.
Thank you. And on behalf of the council, here's a small token of our appreciation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
you.
So congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm sure we'll hear more of you in the future. Do you have a seat to go back to? And I'm sure you'll be speaking to us later as well. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Told you there were so many great things about being there. We now move on to public question time. I need a motion from...
The motion is suspend standing orders.
Thank you, Sven. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Henderson. What happens now is I invite people to come and speak to us. You will have 3 minutes to speak to us. We expect you to speak to us with a whole lot of respect, as we will listen to you with respect. So if it gets a bit too personal or a bit too heated, I will ask you to leave. So please, that's... I know we have somebody here who wishes to speak to us about a planning issue. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to us about other than climate change or a planning issue? We'll get to you later, thanks. I just wanted to get the order in. So, with your leave, I think we have... Who wants to speak to us about a planning issue? Okay. We'll put you towards the end, if that's okay. Thank you. Okay. Who wishes to speak to us on climate change issues? Mr. White, would you like to come forward? And when you speak to us, you will, as I said, have 3 minutes. It will be timed. We're ruthless. Speak into the microphone, state your name, and if you represent anyone, who you represent.
Thank you. My name is Terry White, and I'm with the Mount Alexander.
And you need to address us.
But you just yes, too.
Yes.
My name is Terry White, and I'm with the Mount Alexander Climate Emergency Team. And I want to talk to you about the campaign, the petitioning that's been going on in Mount Alexander for quite some time. We're between a rock and a very hard place. My dad's generation would have said we're up Ship Creek in a barbed wire canoe. And why do I say that? I say that because here in Castlemaine, we've got a local government that takes the United Nations climate science reports as its official climate position. And at the same time, we've got a federal government in Canberra that's giving $4.4 billion in subsidies to a private company to open up in one of the world's biggest coal fields. We've got millions of children across the world on the streets pleading for adults to take immediate action to cut emissions and to abandon fossil fuels. And with some of those, the instigators of those marches right here in this room, well, we've got a Federal Resources Minister, Matt Carnarvon, saying, I want kids to be in school to learn about how you build a mine, how you do geology, and how you drill for oil and gas. The 2018 ICCP climate report said we've got just this next 10 years to keep global temperatures below 1.5 degrees. And they tell us that that would require all nations to slash their global greenhouse gas emissions 45% below 2010 levels by 2030 and reach net zero by 2050. And to date, only 2 nations, Morocco and the Gambia, have set that target, and all the rest have settled for less. And what are the chances of avoiding dangerous tipping points if everybody did what Morocco and the Gambia are doing? The ICCP report says it's 1 in 2. That's a 50-50 chance of success. Obviously, if it was an emergency, we'd double the emission cuts and we'd cut the time bound by a third. Outside this room, there are over 2,000 people, 1,600 from within this postcode, who filled in a petition asking Council to declare a state of climate emergency. And there's over 800 who have said on a little pledge card, we're willing to help and we'll work on a plan for this town.
Terry, that's your
That's the 3 minutes?
that's the 3 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, Terry. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Please come up. So you're doing it far more gracefully than I would.
I made a mistake of trying to run in the main. I'm still living with it. Which way do I point? My name is Malcolm Robbins. I'm also a member of the Mount Alexander Climate Emergency Team, and I want to reinforce, but not repeat, what Terry has just stated. The issue we face is one of an existential threat, and an existential threat means something which threatens the future of humanity and the biosphere, and that is essentially what we're addressing, and that's what a state of emergency is about. It's a state of mind, a state of action, where you stop business as usual and get into addressing the problem. As Terry said, you have 10 to 12 years to actually make decisive action. And the general consensus among the scientific community and the engineering community, I happen to be an engineer for my sins, is that the IPCC figures are far too optimistic. In fact, the situation in the consensus of knowledgeable climate scientists and people who understand the numbers is that it is much, much worse, and that if we do not meet the targets which are typified by the petition targets that we put in, which are 100% renewable energy for council operations by 2025, and the net zero carbon emissions from the community by 2030, our chances of coming out in 2100 with a land that is livable in by our grandchildren and their children is minimal. Minimal. Not just 50%, but virtually zero. So that's the situation. We're facing an emergency, and it's an emergency due to global heating, and furthermore it's an emergency due to anthropogenic global heating, i.e. that has been created in the last 200 years by the burning of fossil fuels primarily. So I think I've probably used up my 3 minutes by now. So the message is that I support what Terry says, but
You've
even
still
more
got a
strongly.
minute. And were you tabling the petition or not?
The emergency team is tabling the petition tonight for consideration by council prior to next meeting. And I would like also to take the opportunity, if I've got a second, to commend Max Lesser for putting a climate-orientated item on the agenda, which is parallel and matches in part some of the things that we've been. We had a community meeting here with 300 people last week, and we have been working on this and are continuing to work on this in much the line that Max has put in his item. And although I haven't seen how the motion comes out, it looks to me like it's got the potential for being a very positive contribution to firming up the attack on the climate warming. Thank you.
Thank you. Eliza, would you like to speak next? I assume you're all putting up your hand in the order in which you wish to speak.
I don't know. Who did you say?
You.
You.
Oh, me. Goody. Sorry.
Eliza Tree.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. It's great to have this opportunity to actually connect with the machinations of our wonderful Shire. I think that we all realise that it's been 30 years now that the climate has been very seriously on the agenda as under great threat. And unfortunately we've been increasing our carbon emissions rather than actually scaling back and transitioning to a more sustainable future. And I've seen wonderful work in the Mount Alexander Shire, and there's been several incredibly interesting proposals and models put up of coordinating power systems and, you know, doing all sorts of really good stuff to actually transition to a very much more renewable future. And I'm really hoping that Mount Alexander Shire, both the council and the community, can see ourselves as a perfect place to really make a great example of a model community which can work very cleverly with dealing with so many of the different issues, creating sustainable employment, transitioning to renewable energy, technology and applications, to educating our public like we did with the Castlemaine 500. Perhaps we could have a Castlemaine 5000 to educate 5,000 households as to being sustainable and for all of us to reduce our wastage. And a lot of that comes from good education, as we experienced with the Castlemaine 500 project. So I think that Mount Alexander Shire has shown great leadership in so many ways. Over the years there have been a lot of different programs put in place. For instance, what Angela Munro did many years ago, looking at heat transfer and energy transfer amongst the businesses. Perhaps we could have there's so many opportunities to educate, engage, and make the transition and make ourselves a really great model community along those lines. And to create climate change refuges for nature, to care far more for our water and our soils, to grow really fantastic food. There's so many opportunities, and it's been really wonderful being involved with the climate emergency petition, to seeing the enthusiasm which has been shown by many people in the community and many people outside of the community. I think people are really seeing that this is really an exciting part of our future, and as Greta says, action brings hope, and it's time for climate action now. Thanks.
Did someone else wish to speak on this issue? Thank you.
Thank you. My name's David Carey. My claim to fame is being Harriet's dad, but I'm also an engineer. I run a local engineering practice. We specialize in functional safety engineering, and since this strike has started a year ago, I've been inspired to do some of my own research about the whole issue. And quite frankly, I've been horrified at what I've discovered from the situation we face globally. And I do think it's a real emergency, but I just want to emphasize one particular point that I think most people assume that the IPCC and the United Nations, the Paris Agreement, has been something that is considered adequate to address the situation. And I note in particular a report recently issued by Engineers Australia, which is the peak body for engineers in Australia, and of which there's over 100,000 member engineers in Australia, who are bound by a code of ethics that involves sustainability and other professional integrity practices. But the Engineers Australia recently in August issued a response to the climate change, the Federal Climate Change Authority, to the actions being taken according to the Paris Agreement. And they noted in their introduction that there's a 1 in 2 to a 1 in 3 chance of failure of achieving the 2-degree threshold, which is considered generally the tipping point for the situation going out of human control, for accelerated feedback loops and so forth that would plunge us into a very desperate cataclysmic future. Our bridges are constructed to a 1 in 10,000, our dams maximum 1 in 10,000 chance of failure. This Paris Agreement, the measures that we have put forward, have a 1 in 2 to a 1 in 3 chance of hitting the 2-degree tipping point. That is cataclysmic for our entire world. That is what we face. Everybody says we have 8 to 10 years. We have already surpassed, with the carbon budget that has hit our atmosphere, we have surpassed the 1 in 10 chance of failure, the 90% success rate today with what carbon dioxide is in our atmosphere. So I urge you to consider this an absolute emergency and consider the Paris Agreement to be woefully inadequate by modern engineering, risk management, and acceptable rates of success. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak on this issue? Ms. Young, would you like to come forward?
Good evening. I didn't plan
Just
to
before you
speak.
start, just hang on a second, sorry. Can I just check that there's no more filming happening? Okay, thank you. Sorry, Lucy.
That's okay. I just gave my heart a chance to beat even harder. But I didn't plan on speaking. I was just thinking about I know that there's going to be something tabled tonight with signatures on it, and it just brought to mind my mum, who's 84. She lives in Castlemaine. The day of the 2,000 odd people gathering in Dickory Park, she rang me and said, "Are you going to that thing? I'd like to come with you." My mum has never been to a protest in her life. She's very conservative, and she came along and sat beside me. I decided to stay in Castlemaine instead of going to Melbourne on that day. And when she heard about the petition, she's never signed a petition in her life. She said, "Where can I do that?" She's not that mobile anymore, and she stood in line and waited to sign that petition. So I just bring her into the room tonight because she's an older woman, she's conservative, and she's also very intelligent and educated, and she knows that this is something that as a community we need to think about. So I just wanted to bring her voice into the room. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this issue? Thank you.
My name's Cassia Reid. I didn't plan on speaking tonight, but I feel compelled to speak. I have a PhD in ecology. I loathe the word emergency, and I think it's essential. I look in the faces of my daughters, and I don't want to say the word emergency to them. I lecture at La Trobe University and to young, hopeful students, and I don't want to say the word emergency to them. But as an ecologist who's been walking in these landscapes for 10 years, I've been witnessing the change that is already with us. I've been witnessing the stringy bark trees on the ridge lines. They're dying. There's some growth from the interior that you see happens after a fire. They keep being wiped out and then they're coming back, but eventually they're not going to come back. I see our red gums very stressed. The stress for the stringy barks and the red gums is drought stress, low rainfall, and it is temperature. And then they become vulnerable to all the other attacks from things like lurks, the little insects that live on the leaves. I'm watching it. I'm watching the chocolate lilies coming up this spring and going back down again before they've had a chance to set seed. We are seeing the changes now. We need to act now so we can keep the landscape that we love and our children can grow into it and love the landscape too. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else wish to speak on climate? Somebody's going to have to table this petition or not.
Thank you.
My name's Ilka White. Did I say more before I start?
Can you speak a bit quiet? Sorry.
My name's Ilka White.
Thanks.
Outside this room, we've spoken about how many people. I just want to correct those figures. It's 1644 from this Shire, and in the pledge, 754. The pledge wasn't mentioned before, but we also, in addition to the petition being tabled, have asked people to sign a pledge to assist the council in leading responsible climate action in our Shire. For all of these people and a lot of kids out there, this is a very important meeting. And just as these kids, by their example, triggered a tidal wave of truth-telling around the world, so this council, by telling the truth about the climate emergency, can join the growing numbers of local governments in every state who are not only sending a wake-up call to Canberra, but who are also sending a very necessary psychological message to their communities. We get the climate crisis, we understand the emergency, we're on your side, and this community and this council are totally committed to building a safe climate together. That's what we'd like to hear. And in terms of the word emergency, it's an emergence. See? I think we can see it as an emergence, and we can all act according to that knowledge of the gravity and treat it as an opportunity rather than the death of something. Thank you.
Thank you.
I need to do a formal thing in tabling.
Yes.
Could I table a petition?
Please table it to Ms. Holt.
Do you have it, Malcolm?
Yes. Maybe I can give a quick explanation as to how it's structured.
You shouldn't be on that.
You can have this seat.
The petition we're tabling today is a summary sheet, which is a breakdown by postcode of signatures throughout the Shire, with totals of how many signatures. We're tabling that in a hard-copy form, but because we're a climate-based organisation involved in sustainability, we're taking the rest of the petition in electronic form, and it will be available to councils electronically to download through a URL, which will include all the details. The statistics are there. We've got a summary by postcode and an overall summary of the number of petitions submitted there.
And it's worth mentioning that the signatories of the petition equate to at least 11% of the people living within this Shire.
Thank you. Would you just wait a moment? Okay, I've got an announcement to make about the petition, and I want you to hear me all the way through this announcement, please. The announcement is that we cannot accept this as a petition under our Local Law 71. So Local Law 1, paragraph 71. So just keep listening. That's a hard statement to hear, and I appreciate that. Our local law is very specific, and it's probably a little bit outdated because it doesn't acknowledge electronic. We may need to consider that. However, as it is, we can't accept it. What we can accept is the intent and the meaning of what this actually represents. By not having a legal petition on the table, that means we councillors can actually debate it tonight. If this was a legal petition, according to our local laws, we couldn't have debated anything on climate change tonight. So the local laws absolutely determine how our meetings are run for any decision to be legal. So sorry about that. So if you can take it as it's not legal, we really take your intent and we can debate the issue. I really hope you take that with all the calmness around that. Thank you.
Can I just raise a point? Sorry, just raise a point there, and possibly this is for the CEO. Can we accept the information as documentation only to assist us in any future decisions we may make? So in other words, we're not accepting it as a petition, so it doesn't change anything with local laws. We accept the information purely as, including the electronic form, as information, as documentation or information.
Mayor, you're absolutely within your rights to consider it, to acknowledge it and recognise it in some other form than a petition.
So can that be noted in the minutes, Ms Holt? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Patrusma, I appreciate that. Okay. Are there any more climate change? Otherwise, I've got 3 more people who have indicated they wish to speak on totally other issues. And I think I'm going to have to ask for an extension. Not quite yet, another 5 minutes. Thank you. Okay, so I'll now move on to the planning issue. Could I have the first speaker? By the way, what we will do is bring up after we close public question time, our councillors will bring up a notice of motion to move the debate on the motion forward, so you don't have to sit through all the other stuff that we have to do. Just to let you know that we just have to keep going through the process as is. Okay, sorry. Please. Yes, thank you.
Good evening, councillors, and thank you for the opportunity to speak here this evening. My name is David Foley, and I would like to make a statement with regard to planning application 108, which seeks to develop a permaculture farm and associated dwelling at Eagles Road, Harcourt. Long and I understood that the planning report was obliged to be discouraging. However, we are concerned that the report contains inaccuracies and omissions. It misunderstands our agricultural activity and ignores our whole farm plan. Our submission addressed 17 clauses in the planning scheme, yet the report responds to only 6. The planning scheme explicitly requires applicants to respond to 25 decision guidelines relevant to the farming zone, yet the report never mentions these. Instead, it tangentially refers to the farming zone through VCAP precedents, which are not comparable to our proposal. This has resulted in the report's failure to acknowledge the balance within the planning scheme and has created a bias in the report's conclusion. The planning report's argument is entirely based on its characterisation of the farm as minor and more consistent with the lifestyle or hobby farm. The objections raised in the VCAP precedents cited all hinge on this conclusion. They presuppose that the development is exclusively for rural residential purposes. The whole farm plan, which Lon and I wrote, provides a clear pathway to restoring the fertility of the land and establishing a productive permaculture farm. When the plan is fully implemented, the farm could contain up to half an acre of vegetable gardens, 4 acres of orchards, and 17 acres of pasture or fodder for livestock. Based on the reported yields from other permaculture properties in Australia, this has the potential to feed over 200 people with fruit, vegetables, eggs, poultry and red meat every day. VCAT have defined a productive agricultural activity as one which delivers a net gain in the yield of primary produce. The planned farm passes this test. The planning scheme insists that the construction of a dwelling must be required to support the rural use of the land. In its precedents, VCAT has established that in such instances a dwelling is permitted if agricultural enterprise would be detrimentally affected by being operated on an absentee basis. Permaculture farms achieve diversity and sustainability by replacing traditional farming's focus on annual crops with integrated perennial crops. This means rather than mechanically sowing hundreds of acres of land with a monoculture crop that is harvested once, a far small area is planted with a diverse mix of species, which are persistent and crop every year. Implementing a permaculture design is labour intensive. Once established, the labour required to maintain the permaculture farm reduces. However, the frequency of interventions does not. Different species crop at different times of year, and labour inputs related to horticulture and animal management is continuous throughout the year. Given the majority of permaculture interventions are manual, our farm's development is directly connected to the amount of time we can spend on site. Operating on an absentee basis would prevent the growth of our farm. In summary, our proposal contains a legitimate permaculture farm which will achieve a significant primary output and fundamentally requires a dwelling. The farm plan is agriculturally sound as the land has natural features which lend it to permaculture design, and water security is provided by a 6 megalitre Colibon licence. Finally, this is a viable, shovel-ready plan as we have the experience, time and financial resources to implement it.
Thank you. There was another speaker on the planning issue.
My name is Lana, I'm the second applicant. So, good evening, Mayor Mashin and councillors. I would like to start by telling you a bit about us. Dave grew up on a farm in Ireland where he attended an agricultural high school before attaining a degree in computer science. This farm proposal is Dave returning to his roots as a 6th generation farmer. I am not a farmer, but I enjoyed many years living in Ireland and participating in Dave's family farm. This experience sparked my desire to build a farm together. I have recently finished my Masters in Primary Education and I intend to contribute to the community through both these vocations. We have saved hard to buy this land and we have the financial capacity to develop the farm. As outlined in phase 1 of our whole farm plan that we developed ourselves, our intention is to build temporary accommodation and begin rehabilitating the land. This will give us time and resources to develop the farm without the financial drain of building a house and yet enable us to live on the land as required by the permaculture design. Dave's family are travelling from Ireland in November to help us implement phase 1. Our permanent dwelling will be developed later, but within the time frame of the planning permit. While the process of applying for a planning permit has been lengthy and at times exhausting, we believe it also shows our commitment. In the time since we made the offer in February, we have returned to the area to interact with our neighbours, local farmers and businesses. Throughout this journey, we have been encouraged by what we have discovered about the land's potential, our wonderful neighbours, and what we saw from this thriving community. In the current context, we found it disappointing that our planning report on our proposal does not mention the word climate or environment once. The planning scheme in clause 1301, 2105 and 2106 recognises that traditional farming practices are associated with a loss of environmental quality, and these practices become less viable as a result of climate change. The stated objectives of these clauses are to increase diversity and resilience of agriculture. BCAP precedents and statements from councillors regarding previous planning proposals also acknowledge that small-scale agriculture is productively viable and should not be prohibited based on the interests of large-scale agriculture. We chose to employ regenerative agriculture techniques in our farm plan because we agree with the planning scheme's insistence that any development must result in a net gain in environmental condition. We plan to do this by removing pest species, revegetating 3.5 acres with natives, rehabilitating soil and deploying sustainable water management techniques. The farm plan also responds to the economic challenges facing farming by ensuring our primary produce is premium, diversified and includes many value-added products. Councillors, we have reviewed the proceedings of related planning decisions and we do understand your concerns. However, we ask that the following things are considered in the decision this evening. First, our commitment to making a positive contribution to Harcourt's agriculture and community. Our farm plan that details a productive agricultural activity which will support us and enhance agriculture. The proposed dwelling as a requirement to support the implementation of the farm plan. And finally, but most importantly, our proposal is sustainable and respects the environment in all aspects, even the proposed passive house dwelling.
You two have got the timing there. Okay, I think, Ms. Sanders, you were the last speaker. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. In which case, I think we need, Councillor, can I have a notice of motion to extend the...
Public question.
Yeah, public question time, thank you. Suspension of standing orders to 7:30? 7:30?
I'll second then.
Second, Councillor Neame and Councillor Petrusma, thank you. Okay, somebody else wanted to speak on planning issues? Thank you. Sorry.
My name is John Baldock. I live in North Harcourt also, and I'm here to lodge to support my objections to the planning proposal, both for the 108 Planning Authority planning application 108 and also for planning application 185. Both are similar and both have the same issues as far as my objections are concerned.
Sorry, just hold a moment. Can we stop that? So I'm just double checking which ones you're referring to.
One is Quilla Farms, which the two speakers previously have just spoken about.
Yes.
And the other one is the corner of Eagles Road and Mackayver Highway, Mackayver Road.
We're not making a decision on that tonight.
I thought your email said that you were, but yeah. Okay.
Okay. How's it coming up to us? Okay. Okay. Just so we know where we are, and we've just
okay, so we're only talking about one, okay?
You can talk about two, but We're just about to restart the clock for you. Okay, go for it. Sorry about that.
Both of the subject properties that I'm talking about are within a farming zone, and they're both zone farming, FZ. The Harcourt Valley has long been a major supplier of apples, pears, wine, cider and other fruits and vegetables. Together with the use of sown pasture and or grazing, make this valley generally prime farming land, which has got to be some of the best farming land in this municipality, I would think. And my view is that it should be preserved at all for that usage as much as possible. Planning for Harcourt Township is currently underway, and it provides plenty of room for housing and small acreage, being 2 hectares up to, I think, within that planning proposal. Both the council's own planning scheme and the state government's planning scheme, well, policies I should be saying here, both of them require residents not construct on allotments less than 40 hectares without a planning permit. The intent of these policies is clearly to preserve land zoned for farming zone, zoned as farming zone for farming purposes, and infers considerable restriction in obtaining a planning permit for any further development. Arguments that smaller lots are not viable farming is addressed in council's own policy, which indicates that viability of individual lots is not ground on which to justify construction of a dwelling within farming zones. The proposal to construct these dwellings and outbuildings are contrary to council's planning policy. The proposed construction of the dwelling and outbuildings not only reduces the ability of the land to be farmed, but would place further pressure on other land to be also rezoned or developed as smaller lots. As pointed out by Councillor Henderson at our last similar meeting to this in relation to 10 Dr. Vargas Lane, approval of such planning permits would be the thin edge of the wedge, which would open all small acreage allotments to be constructed to the construction of dwellings and to encourage splitting up of and sale of larger farming properties into small parcels.
Thank you. That is your 3 minutes.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you very much. Ms. Eagle, did you wish to speak?
My name is Elizabeth Eagle, and I'm here on my own behalf. I would like to talk about ECO 46A. It's almost at the end of your agenda. It's planning permit determinations by council policy. I've only come across this afternoon, so forgive me if I've got some facts wrong. I haven't had enough time to study it. Now, I can understand that council wants to make the planning process effective and efficient, but I'm keen to understand the practical consequences of this new policy. At present, as I understand it, once an application is advertised, members of the public have a month to submit an objection, but council is obliged to receive and consider all objections, including those submitted after the 1 month limit, before making a decision. So how will that system work under the new policy? Where objections are received before the time limit, will these be the only objections that officers will consider? Are these the only objections that will determine whether the matter is decided by officers or councillors? And what happens when more objections are submitted after the time limit? Will these be considered by officers, and will they be added to the total number of objections that may trigger the matter going before council? On a slightly different aspect, quite frequently council officers request more information from applicants, and sometimes applicants may submit altered plans. How are members of the community to be notified of these changes, and how can they make additional submissions relevant to these changes? Now I see at point 3.2, it sets out a policy for applicant objector council briefings, and I think this is a useful idea. However, I also see that at point 3.7 of the policy, that council will not receive questions relating to any planning permit application when that matter is being considered at the same meeting. Now, if new information arises or there are changes to the application between the council briefing and the council meeting, how can members of the public bring these matters to the notice of councillors if they're not permitted to raise questions at the relevant council meeting? Now, in a more general point, in my experience, submitting an objection to a planning application gives two opportunities. The first is to express an opinion about the appropriateness of the proposal. But the second, and often the more important and useful opportunity, is to point out how the development might be improved for the benefit of the whole community. And these changes can and sometimes do end up in the recommendation that comes before council. It would be a pity if councillors never got to see the strength of concerns or the valuable suggestions for improvement that are contained in the objections that do not trigger the matter coming before council. So how can councillors be sure that they're not missing out on this valuable community input? Thank you.
They're very brilliantly timed. Planning issues.
Yes, I signed the form that came in.
Yep, okay, please.
Me?
Yes, please. Sorry.
My name is Max Murphy. I live at 6 Reservoir Road. I'm the owner of the property in question in this planning application. I would like to make a point of clarification in relation to the document and also two or three other quick comments. It says in the actual application on page 45 in the council document, the subject land is one of 5 parcels on title and the land area of the proposed development is 10.4 hectares. There are currently dwellings on 2 of the other allotments within this holding. I'd just like to clarify that you're showing your age. I moved to Harcourt in 71. I've lived there ever since. I've lived 48 years on that property. I purchased a church from the Uniting Church at a clearing sale. They were removing all excess surplus property. I was the only tender. I inherited a church which I didn't really want, but I thought, well, I'll put it in, it's part of my property, I'll get it back. That land was originally given to the church from the original founding landowner that I now live on that property. We built a house in 81. I've lived there with my wife, Wendy, ever since. The other parcel of land that I purchased was in 2005, 14 years ago. So this planning application gives the impression I'm some sort of a land baron and I've got all this land. It's a lifetime build-up of small parcels of land. The only reason on this application it's got on one title, it's combined purely for rating purposes. Why would I pay 5 single municipal charges when I own one block of land with a few titles? We were encouraged when we came to council, which is a good move, we thank them, to help reduce costs, was to combine everything on one rate base, which is quite a legal thing to do, one rating thing. So I'd just like to clarify that I'm not a land baron, and I take a little bit of umbrage, but not a lot, but a little bit of umbrage that I'm some sort of wealthy person. I am not. 2 other brief points I would like to make is, and this has been delivered at pace for a long time, there are a significant number of other successful non-apple farming activities in Harcourt, and bear in mind, apples are declining in Harcourt. I think most of us would know that they're not growing. It's not a growth industry. Cherries, strawberries, pick your own. Quite a number of vineyards from 1 acre, 1 hectare up to 20, 30, 40 acres. Acres I'm talking, I'm old. Cideries, 2 or 3. Fruit gardens, a wholesale plant nursery which runs the biggest companies in regional Victoria. It's got a massive plant nursery in Harcourt. I didn't even know about it 2 weeks ago. 5.5 acres of pots. A lot of water, a lot of work. None of these applications I've just spoken, not one of those farms I don't think is 100 acres. Some of them as low as 5 and 6 and 7 acre properties. So tick, they will not meet the planning criteria 101. Most of these enterprises would not have met all the criteria in this planning application as I've read in the last few days. They could not have met it. Living here all my life, one of the triggers is they bought properties that had a house on it. Problem solved. You just can't find those properties in Harcourt all the time. This person, or this applicant's got a unique opportunity and they're being stymied by a house. If they bought a property with a house, they wouldn't even be here.
Thank
And
you.
some of those,
Sorry,
one
3 minutes.
final point is, I'll continue to drag me away. In closing, Harcourt's been identified as a growth area,
Thank
and
you.
I would hope the council would support this application.
Thank you very much. So I think we have one more. Please come forward. And as you're coming forward, councillors, can we extend?
She's the last one.
We've got enough time. Okay. Close run. You've got 3 minutes exactly.
Okay, I could have said this was climate action because it's public smoking, of course. But I did send this question to council last month, but I didn't get a reply, so I'd like to
Can
just
you
put
say
it.
your name? Just
Yes, my
everyone else who
name, Joyce Sanders, passive smoker. Now, in the 2 years since Victoria banned smoking at outdoor cafe tables, some of the problems in the legislation have emerged. And last week, Melbourne extended, not last week, last month, they extended their smoke-free area to Burke Street Mall. And some other councils have extended the smoking ban to all council footpaths. Of course, overseas, most countries took a simpler path and banned smoking within 5 or 10 metres of any doorway, which covers all of these areas and discourages window shoppers from smoking as they walk along. Melbourne surveyed their citizens and found that 83% wanted the new smoking ban. And I imagine that Castlemaine citizens would poll similarly. I want to ask councillors if they might be willing to look at the footpath smoking issue again this time, because some of the problems that have emerged is that if you ban smoking from council footpaths at cafes when they're eating, there'll always be one or two who instead ban food from their footpaths so they can continue to allow smokers and drinking, and then that causes a peculiar phenomenon. The smokers concentrate, understandably, at this small number of cafes, and because there's no ban on children being with their parents in these smoking areas, it's possible to see smoking couples with 3 or 4 small children and even babies in prams smoking at these tables where the smoke is concentrated for the children by a large number of other smokers all around them. And as long as we continue to allow smoking on council footpaths, we'll continue to undermine the whole point of non-smoking legislation. Smokers not able to smoke at the cafes will then congregate at the bench seats on the footpath so that families and the elderly can't use those seats. The seats may sit outside chemist doors, which gives people who are ill a big blast of smoke whenever doors open, like at the Amcal chemist. The little stainless steel butt-out containers actually say to smokers that smoking is okay here, and smokers have told me this, even when container sits outside a cafe. Thank you very much. I just wanted to know if council would reconsider the smoking policy.
Mr. Yusupovich, do you know which local law this is and when it will be reviewed?
Don't know exactly which local law, but it's between 2 and 6. And we are reviewing all the local laws and trying to streamline them to bring them into one general amenity local law, which would be local law number 2. At the moment, the way the local law is structured, and I apologise for not responding to the email. That went out today, funnily enough, so yeah, you will get it, but it took a little bit longer than I hoped. Sorry about that. Yeah, so the current local law doesn't allow council at the moment to extend smoking bans outside of what state government legislates. So state government has legislation around 10 metres within playgrounds, I think, and sporting ovals and dining areas and that sort of stuff. However, council has the ability to incorporate that into a local law. All I'm saying is the current local law doesn't have that. So there is a potential for council to introduce that in their local law review, which will be coming through a series of workshops at council by the end of the year, and we hope to have a draft version out for community comment by the first quarter of next year, and have it adopted by mid-year.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Sanders. There being no more questions? Okay, councillors, can I have Councillor Patrice, Councillor Neiman to resume standing orders. I always have trouble with that one. Councillors, do we wish to have a notice of motion to bring forward an agenda item? So what's your motion?
I move that we change the order of the agenda and bring item 12, notice of motion of 12.1, notice of motion 2019-07, climate change debate, bring that as the next item in the agenda.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Neiman, you're seconding that. All those in favour? Those against? The motion's carried. Thank you. Okay, councillors, we now have a motion before us.
I'm going to move this notice of motion, as stated, as a prerequisite for action by council on the climate change debate. Invite climate strikers and other climate action groups or interested parties to speak or present to a special open councillor briefing session to enable a whole of community approach to changing climate conditions that affect our community.
Thank you, Councillor Lesser. Councillor Patrusman, a second. Is there any objections to that motion? There's one objection. We have a debate. Okay. I actually need, before we go, I'm just trying to get the order right. So we have the first speaker has 5 minutes. The seconder, mover has 5. Everyone else has 3. The seconder has a chance to say, I'm not going to speak yet. The mover can then come back at the end with right of reply. I just need to find out. No, we'll just go with it. Councillor Lesser, go for it. Others can talk. I will ask. Okay.
Just before I start, one clarification. I can ask for extra time.
You don't want
it.
Keep going. Come on.
Still quite quiet.
Okay. I've got a bit of
Councillor Lesser has a very bad throat, so
okay.
put the microphone
yes,
right
I'll
up.
jam it right in there. Okay, I'm the newest councillor on the block, and I'm quite taken back by the support from the climate activists in the audience for my motion here. I wasn't expecting that. Okay. My aim in moving this motion is to enable a whole of community approach to the changing climate conditions that affect our community and reduce the emotive language, not the urgency, climate change is having, because it's a divisive topic in all our communities. And our community is no exception. As councillors, we all want to achieve the same outcome. We have even had facilitated discussions to achieve a level of consensus. I guess my approach to an end objective is somewhat different, hence my motion. By whole community discussion and bringing everyone along, we can all come to a common goal and end statements. This is hard for me, and I guess for my fellow councillors and the community at large. And we need to work together and do what is right for our community and to achieve the desired outcome. And I'm going to just quote from a news item and by a social researcher called Rebecca Huntley, and she says there's no shortage of research that shows people are worried about climate change. The problem is not people thinking it's a problem. The problem is, what are people willing to do about it? The dilemma, as I see it, is like a household budget. We need to break even and, if possible, save some money. Council's no different in regard to the changes in climate that affect our community. I'm now going to try to outline my climate action budget example. As a council, we'd like to achieve zero net emissions for our operations, which we sort of agree on. We want to look at different strategies and budgets, and we also want to look at the cost-benefit analysis of the things that we have to do. Now that's a brief outline on the positive income side. But to the opposite side, and this is where it gets messy, Council supports a number of events and actions either by community grants, event funding, or indirectly through Council office at times. And I'm just going to list some of these and some of the dilemmas. The first one is Council supports coal-fired transport. Secondly, Council supports diesel producing events. Example, the one I was just on recently, which I took part in, which was a tractor pull. No, I was with a fellow councillor and we didn't win. We have a hot rod community. This is the hot rod centre of Australia. Then once a year we have truck convoys down the main street. We also have historical vehicles, motorbikes, etc. Yes, but we're all going to change to electric transport. Hang on a moment. And this is the next dilemma. What about, hydrogen cars? Well, we know that that's a possibility of that coming in a very short space of time, within 5 years, according to this news item. And the other thing is electric vehicles are generated using coal-powered grids, power that's been generated by coal. So hydrogen is a much cleaner option. So it's not that simple to work out what we should do, and of course Council's sort of equipment as well. But hang on a minute, we've got it all under control here. And the statement again from that report from the IPCC says transform to clean energy, clean transport and industry alone will not cut global emissions enough to avoid dangerous warming beyond 1.5 degrees. And what is their answer? We must urgently revolutionise what we eat, how we grow it, the way we use land, if the world is to combat dangerous climate change, according to that panel. And that sort of impacts upon our farmers and my fellow sheep farmer. Yes, I'm applying for an extension of time under the local law.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Secondly, we have. Is it supported?
Yep.
3 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
For this moment, yes. Yeah. Okay. Yes, I'm getting there. Okay. We should do what other councils do. Yes, right. Okay, so we come across to Moreland City Council. And what did they do? And they decided that they would have a meat-free Monday. And I only recently discovered that one of my Beatle fans, Paul McCartney's behind this one. Anyhow, and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released a report saying that meat-based diets cause more pollution than other diets. Now, Moreland City Council said, and they voted in September to declare their climate initiative, that meat-free Mondays, I'm going to make it to Tuesdays, but anyway, meat-free Mondays was a way to help battle climate change. And quote, I think it's acceptable that we put our mouths where our money is, and she told the meeting. Okay, so what sort of a message does that give to our meat producers in the Shire and to our farmers? So how does the community, want to pursue this? Okay, I'm biased on this topic because I'm a vegetarian, have been for 50 years, so I'm biased there. Okay, still on the debit side of the ledger, industry. We've got a new industry that turned up into town. A young couple built a factory, moved the whole enterprise from here, from Melbourne to here, and they're stuck because they don't know what to do with their wood waste. This is, so we're supporting, industry. This is on the negative side of the ledger. The real problem is, what are we personally willing to do? And finally, to our young people, I know about the anxiety this debate causes. I want to relieve this anxiety by bringing the community together and to hear the young people's voice. So I reiterate, coming back to the beginning, that this is about bringing the whole community together, and all these different organisations that are contrary to what council's policy is. So in one hand we're saying we're going to do this, and at the same time we're handing over money to people to do the direct opposite. So there's a real dichotomy here, and that's why I believe that this whole debate needs to be community driven. We need to invite all these sectors of the community on board so that we as a council can move forward without leaving anybody behind, because it's the young person's world that we need to look after. Thank you.
I'll speak. Just a second.
Sorry,
I'll speak now.
You will speak now.
Yep.
Thank you.
I fully support what Councillor Lesser says. What I particularly like is that he's stating that all interested parties, that doesn't exclude anyone at all, that's every interested party in the Shire, we get together with, that we get together with and try to come to a decision on what we do about the climate change issue in a whole of community approach. And I think that's really, really important, because that's what we're elected to do, is to take the whole community with us and bring everyone along. And that may also include some negative aspects that some people may not be happy with, but that's the way you bring the whole community together. I was very happy to see the support from the Mount Alexander Climate Change Emergency Team within the room today in relation to Max's motion. The one thing Max left out in his little thing about we do support some coal-fed, that's in relation to the steam train.
Yes, I did.
He's left the steam train out. The steam train is in fact coal-fired, and it is one of our biggest tourism draw cards, and that is something that we need to consider with anything we do in relation to climate change. The hot rodders again, and various other aspects such as our truck show and various things we do which may not necessarily fit. There's 2 tractor pools, there's one at Marklefoot and there's one out at Metcalfe, of course. So we do have quite a few events in the Shire, but if we are not very careful, we may lose those events. So we need to take a cautious approach and take the whole community with us and get this right. So I think it's really important that we work with all parts of the community, and I support the motion, and I'm very happy to hear that the Mount Alexander Climate Emergency Team also support Max's motion. And I think it's really important, more than ever at the moment, to bring our community together, not drive more wedges in it. And I believe I can also reserve a right to a reply under the local laws.
I think only Councillor Lesser can do that. Can I check with the governance on that? Can a seconder have a right of reply?
I may not.
Seconder can wait till the end.
Seconder can wait till the end, that's what I asked, but only the mover. Thank you. Getting this governance right. Local laws, I tell you. Councillor Henderson.
What climate emergency? I absolutely support this motion, but it's not enough, for heaven's sake. This is all about the community. We're the council. We operate as a council. We have council operations which generate greenhouse gases. And that's our primary responsibility. We can certainly work with the community as much as possible. Yes, please. And I'm sure all the climate change deniers will be there, front of house, telling us what a stupid idea it is. Yeah. But first and foremost, I think we have to declare a climate emergency. to look at our own operations and implement a roadmap that will lead to zero net emissions, and that's where the tractor pull and the coal-fired, etc. come in, zero net emissions by 2025 for council, and also undertake further actions to adapt to climate change as identified in subsequent strategies and budgets. And ensure all these actions are informed by cost-benefit analyses to ensure that council invests in actions with the best returns while maintaining its services and sustainable long-term budget. And number 3, the community. Because we're not the community, we can't boss the community around. The community put us here as elected representatives, but we can't tell them what to do. They can tell us. And the first thing we can have in our working with the community would be invite all interested parties to speak or present to a special open council briefing session. Council briefing session, which is normally closed except to those who are invited in. We would have an open one where people would be invited to speak, pretty much like this, except you'd get 20 minutes instead of 3, and it would be, in a brief, we could ask questions, etc., debate. How would the community approach to changing climate conditions that affect our community? So I would like to absorb Councillor Lesser's motion into a bigger one, which first of all declares a climate emergency, and 2, focuses on our own operations. Let's do the whole thing right, not just go on half.
Councillor Garber?
Here we go. I'm going to start by saying I actually support emergency declaration. I believe in the science, and for me, above all, I also believe we need to show support to our kids, who really have been leading this charge, and my children being some of them. And I just wanted to also touch probably something on in terms of Councillor Anderson had said. I mean, our operations, as you know, we have a roadmap and we are nearly there. So I'm not sure that declaring a climate emergency would actually make any difference to that. It is going to happen, and we are going to meet our targets. I am concerned, though, that some of the issues raised by Max, that there is the potential to split this community, and it could be reminiscent of a recent debate. And that really has concerned me, particularly over the weekend. I think we need to show leadership in this and bring people with us. There will be people who are for, and there will be some who are against. I actually believe in this community, the most of our community would actually be for it, but they don't actually know what it means. I'd like to support Councillor Max's Lesser's motion, but I would like to see it actually done really quickly, and delaying a decision on this by a month or 2, I don't believe will make any difference.
Can I have a point of clarification? Are you suggesting there's a timeline in there?
No, I'm not. There isn't. But I suppose I'm given a commitment, personal commitment, that I would drive a timeline if it drags out. That it needs to happen quickly. It can't be dragged out for months and months.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Needham.
I concur with Councillor Henderson. There are some things in this world that are important, some things that are urgent. Now we've found something that's both important and urgent, and the reason we've lost about 20 years because there was a lot of talk about it a while back, it died off, it comes back. I think that our society is technologically able that we can cope with things, and the solutions are probably not available at the moment. So I concur, but it's urgent that we do something.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak? I need a point of clarification. I really do on this, because the first line of your notice of motion says, as a prerequisite for action by council on the climate change debate. If your motion passes, or respect, I want clarification on whether that stops any of the action we've got underway on climate until we've had this meeting. I'm just checking. And I actually think I need to check with an officer around the governance, but I'm not sure. What's your intent?
No, my intention was the word is there, debate. It says a prerequisite for council on the climate change debate. It's not about the actions, it's just about the debate of and how we get there. No, can you see there is a difference? No, we're not debating whether climate. No, it's saying the climate. No, it's saying that how we can go forward as a community in the debate, so we get to that end point. I've got a right to reply, haven't I? Yes.
You do it. This is still a clarification.
Okay.
We're not into there yet. I'm just actually trying to get really clear. What is your intent with this? Because I don't want to have to walk out of here and have every action on climate change.
No, that's not. That is not. No, that is not the intent. Intent never has been. We roll forward and we increase it because we drag the community with us. No, it's not meant to stop anything.
Okay.
Does that help?
Anyone else want to speak? No, you have your right of reply. It's 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, as I clarified, we're all after the same thing. We're after this end result of the climate, an emergency, or as the people say, emergent coming. Where there all is that my approach is different, to bring the community with us. Now, I'm just replying to Councillor Henderson, who's made some good points. And this was my whole point. It is okay for the council saying, we're going to do this, but at the same time we're handing out money and supporting the direct opposite. That's the dilemma going on here. And this is council operations. There's no other word for it. This is the operation of the council. So what we do is we say we do this, and then we hand out money to do that. That needs to be sorted out. That's what bringing this community together and saying, what are we personally want to give up or do to change this whole situation, so that we, in our community, we work on the climate change. You know, even I know in my backyard the trees are dying. So this is not saying, no, there's no emergency, there's no. What we're doing here is to get on with it and bring us all together, because all we're going to do here is divide the community. And if you've got a divided community, then the whole thing is just one lot against another lot. This is the importance of bringing all these disparate groups and people that have probably never even thought about the climate change, but we are supporting them. So, you know, you can't have, in my way, you can't have your cake and eat. You can't say we're going to be this, and zero emissions and all that, and at the same time, here it is the money to go and do whatever. It's just cancelling each other out. That's why we need to bring this community together. And that's why I think that my motion is important, because it will achieve the same end result, but just in a different format. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, all those in favour of Councillor Lesser's motion? I declare the motion carried.
Yeah. Well done.
I would express my support and thank you for doing this. I'm also concerned about how we consult with unborn generations. Thank you.
Mick,
Could
can I
we
just clarify something? That the documents that we've accepted, I believe, will go towards Max's motion. I can just make that clear to the people that presented those documents. Even though they're not accepted as a petition, they will certainly help councillors to facilitate Max's motion that's just passed.
Thank you. People in the gallery, you may leave at any time and we can get on with...
have a right of reply?
No. Sorry. Thank you.
We'll be back.
December.
Yeah, I agree.
Next, man.
Okay. Petitions and joint letters, 7.1 on page 5. We've received a petition from Guildford people about the trees, and the recommendation there is that council considers the response to the petition of agenda item PLA 14. There's a recommendation. That's a recommendation. Do I have a motion? Councillor Neiman?
Can we go to that?
Just go straight to it.
Can we go straight to it, or is it?
No, this is just, we won't go straight to it. We'd have to change the agenda order again. So this is just that we consider the petition later in the meeting. I want you to say, yes, you support that recommendation, or you don't.
Yes, I support that recommendation.
So that motion as written, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Trusma. Is there anyone who wishes to object to that? No, declare that motion carried. Petition regarding telecoms tower at Wesley Hill Reserve. We have a recommendation. Do I have a motion?
That's the agenda, man.
Thank you, Councillor Trusma. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cordy, any objections? I declare the matter carried. No committee reports. Assembly of Councillors. We have a recommendation. Do I have the motion? I believe this was going to be your baby, Councillor Lesser.
Okay, I recommend that we do that, but there was an amendment about Councillor Cordy.
On page 11?
I did have it written down, I've lost it here somewhere. That it was to do with commercial interest.
You wanted to change matter 5.1 on page 11, that Councillor Cordy declared a conflict of interest on commercial grounds, so it's incorrectly recorded.
Not a close association.
So with that change, you're going with the motion?
Yep.
Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Trusma. Is there any objection? I declare the matter carried. Approval of leave for the CEO.
No.
I'll move that, Mayor, as per the recommendation.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder, Councillor Neiman? Do we have any objections? Does anyone wish to speak to this apart from to say bon voyage?
And have a good holiday.
Thank you. I declare.
Anybody's way.
Who's second? I've moved it.
Right, okay, so no one else wishes to speak, no one's objected, I declare the motion carried. Thank you.
Who did second?
Councillor
Thank you, Nemo.
So thank you, Mr. Yusupovich. You get to help elect the new mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Challenge accepted.
Okay. Response to petition proposal for a pump track bicycle circuit in Taradale. Page 15. Have a recommendation. Do I have a motion? Councillor Henderson.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to move that Council advises the lead petitioner of Council's decision to not proceed in installing a pump track bicycle service in Taradale at this time. And that's number 1, not number 4. And 2, to investigate the opportunity for construction of a pump track at Lala Bagua Mountain Bike Park. la bagara. Thank you.
I'll second that, Mayor.
Councillor Drewsma, is there any objections? No? Anyone wish to speak?
I think I better know briefly. This was an initiative of a mother of several children who would be here tonight, except they're busy racing in some championships and pump track racing in Bendigo, I think. So they're unable to attend. I'm very keen to have a pump track for Taradale, recognising that it would provide a much required, much needed activity for teenagers in a small town. And it is, and I did support the exploration of this because I'm aware this is not the first, in fact the third time that I've been approached as a councillor in my time here, specifically for something for teenagers to do in Taradale. And it's always about bike tracks, dirt jump tracks, and this is the latest iteration of pump track. I appreciate from the officer's investigation, I thank very much Mr. Civic and his team for taking the time and trouble to go into the possibility of this happening in Taradale, looking at possible site scoring and also doing a careful analysis of what it might involve and coming up with a score which is less than wonderful for the but I'd like to think that we won't write it off completely. We'll see what the community does in response to the initial rebuff, and you never know, they might come back with bigger, grander support and plans. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak? There being no objections, I declare the matter carried. Thank you. We now move on to page 24, a response to petition request for council not to remove trees in Havelock Street, Guildford.
I have a motion.
Thank you. Could you read your motion out?
The council notes that officers have undertaken a detailed investigation of the planting of 12 ironbark trees in Havelock Street, Guildford. Retain the 12 ironbark trees subject to this position. Request officers write to the lead petitioner advising the council's decision. Request officers to write to all adjoining property owners. There is one in Havelock Street, Guildford, advising the council's decision.
Thank you. Councillor Cordy seconding that. It's a hard word. Any objections? No. Do you wish to speak to this, Councillor Nick?
Briefly, even for me.
Put it back on.
I'm certainly no friend of the electronic age. It's important that this is not only about trees, it's about fostering communities. The community itself has done most of the work, or all of the work pretty much. This has been a misunderstanding from the day one. Everybody's been acting with good intent. We need to clean it up. The way to clean it up is to leave the trees there and see how we go. Volunteerism in small shires is absolutely critical. If we had to replace the work that volunteers do, we'd be looking at about $50 an hour, and we just can't afford that. So a lot of small communities, they need encouraging. So that's what we're doing by this. Not only are we putting the trees, and this would be a bad night to talk about taking out trees. Anyway, so that's where I am.
Thank you, Councillor Neiman. Councillor Cordy, do you wish to speak? Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? That being the case, there being no opposition, I declare the motion, but which wasn't the recommendation. Have you got that? You do. Thank you. I declare it carried. I just need to say the official words. Thank you for staying. Moving now to planning permit application 315 of 2018, development of 2 dwellings and a 3-lot subdivision at 75A Duke Street on page 29. Councillors, we have a recommendation. Do we have a motion?
Yes.
Councillor Al.
I'll
Councillor Lesser.
I'll move, as per the recommendation that council issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit for the development of 2 dwellings and a 3-lot subdivision at 75A Duke Street, Castlemaine, subject to the conditions.
A seconder, please.
Happy to second,
Okay, Councillor Patrisma, any objections? Do you wish to speak to this? No? Yes?
It's okay.
Thank you. Councillor Patrisma?
No, I want to say it's very similar to many other subdivisions, basically next door and all the way along Duke Street, so then that's better.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak?
Looks like 2 small houses. Very nice to have some small house additions to Street Street in Castlemaine.
That being the case, I declare the motion carried. Thank you. Okay. Moving to page 43, Planning Permit Application 108/2019 for the use and development of a dwelling and outbuilding at 6 Reservoir Road, Hardwell. Councillors, we have a recommendation. Do we have a motion? Councillor Henderson?
Yes, Mayor, I have a motion that Council issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit for the use and development of a dwelling and outbuildings, works within 200 metres of a waterway, construction of a dam, 3 metres at 6 Reservoir Road, High Court, subject to the following conditions, which continue for another 4 sides, and I'm hoping that our governance officer might be able to distribute copies to interested parties in the gallery. I think my fellow councillor has already a copy of this document.
If we didn't hand this out, we'd have to read the whole thing out to you.
You'd love it, wouldn't you?
Do I have a seconder for Councillor Henderson's motion? So I have Councillor Gardner. Is there any objection? Thank you. Councillor Henderson, would you like to speak to this?
Thank you, Matt. I did notice the quoting me at saying when we refused an application for dwelling on block across the road from here, that I did say that it would lead to splitting up good farmland, and that's not a good idea. So what's different about this one? Well, I think it's totally different. We have before us an application. We've been provided with the farm management plan by our planning department, and it is substantial, and at the heart of it is a permaculture enterprise, which at the heart of any permaculture development of land is a dwelling. Is absolutely essential. I'm not an expert in permaculture, but I do know that it's a method of horticulture, farming, land improvement, turning unproductive land into productive land or increasing productivity that has stood the test of time. It's been around for the best part of 50 years, and the instigator of the whole idea lives in Epsom Springs and is recently assisting our regional fire prevention people in methods of looking after the land to subdue fire, which was demonstrated in last year's fire in Epsom Springs, where his land actually stopped the fire. So it's a proven method of various. This is a plan to develop gardens, orchards, extending up from the house. Now we could say, oh, it's the dreaming, and once they get the application through, they get their permit, well, we'll just get another mansion built on a few hectares, and there'll be a couple of alpacas in the front yard, and nothing much would have changed except we turn another bit of useful farming land into de facto rural residential. But I claim that this is different. I believe in the applicants. I trust them, and just in case, we might not go and trust. At the heart of the conditions here there is, first of all, the farm management plan, number 6. In the conditions, you'll note it says Amended fire management plan must be submitted, and it must have detailed description of the land. It's already pretty detailed, but there needs to be more. Any current land management issues such as erosion, salinity, groundwater, etc. Description of future land management, day-to-day management requirements to be used, nominate expected timelines for specific actions. So this is our planners, who of course informed me, so I couldn't do that at my request. This is drilling down and making sure that farm management plan is actually going to work to the satisfaction of the planners at least. And also there's a section 173 agreement. Now this is an agreement that sits on the title. It's not, doesn't stay with the owner, it is on the title itself. So if the land is sold, it actually is something that any future owner has to follow. And this must be enacted before anything else happens. And the land must at all times be in association with the use of land for agricultural activity as described in the farm management plan. So it's really tying this bit of land into being productive now and into the future. And I think it's exactly what Harcourt wants. This is what we want for Harcourt. We want to turn these marginal land, if you like, okay, maybe 30 sheep for 6 months until it's all eaten out, and then just sit there dry. We want to see it blossom, literally and figuratively, and I think this is giving it a good chance. So I recommend it to my fellow councillors, this report.
Thank you. Did you accept?
No.
I thought so. And then we'll come to you, Councillor Gordy. Here we go. Councillor Gardner?
I mean, this, as Councillor Evans said, this is, we've had a number of these sort of under 40 hectares come before us. And I think the objector noted it needs a planning application for under 40 hectares, and this is what this is doing. I don't know that there's a real hard and fast rule that a house cannot be built on under 40, and it depends on the circumstances. And for me, I see this small parcel of land. I was impressed by the applicants and their farming techniques. Probably something new and different. I do think it will also probably be of benefit to Harcourt, and so that's why I'm supporting it. I don't believe there'll be any impact on neighbouring farms, and yeah, I think encouragement of an activity on these small blocks is a good thing.
Councillor Cordy.
Thanks for the motion. I'll just make a couple of comments. I'm basically, I've supported for a long time the notion of issuing building permits on the small blocks throughout the Shire, because they're really pretty useless without a dwelling, and there's a problem with our planning scheme and the interpretation of it that blocks these sort of developments. But anyway, this one looks like it's going to get through. One of the other comments I'd make is that personally I believe the Section 173 agreement is too onerous, and we've got two keen young farmers here, international experience, but you know, we're putting roadblocks in front of them getting on by way of the 173 agreement, and I think that's a really negative obstacle, and the reality of it is down the track the property will get sold, the farm plan will be a different scheme, and you know, nobody's going to tell people in the future to pull their house down because they're using a different farm plan. The applicants are talking about permaculture, and I first heard about permaculture in 1980. It's not new, but there's a lot of innovation there, and that's the sort of thing we want in Harcourt Valley. So if this gets up, I wish them well with it, and I'm sure the community can benefit from what they're proposing to do. Thank you.
Can I just have a point of clarification? Are you proposing a different motion?
No.
You want a motion to take up the Section 173?
I'll support it.
If if I can get a second, I'll propose to drop the section 173.
I just need to check on a bit of governance. Just hang on. I know you're next. Okay.
I'll second that.
So we have an amended motion, which is to remove the section 173 agreement from the conditions. We have a seconder for that. So we now have to decide which motion we're looking at. No?
Dealing with the amendment thing. The proposal to remove the 173 is all you deal with that.
So all we're dealing with now is a proposal to remove the amendment, to remove the section 173. So we have a mover and a seconder for that, who are not the original movers and seconders, so that's good. And so can we now have a debate around removing it from the conditions? All those in favour of removing it from the conditions, could you please put up your hand? Well, no?
I'd like to speak against the amendment.
That's what I'm trying to find out. Who's in favour, who's against? Yeah, I'm just trying to find. Yeah. So what I'm trying to do now is not call for the vote. I'm just trying to work out how to run the debate. That's all, okay? Thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Councillor Petrusma, for clarification. So I'm just trying to think who's in support of the amendment, who's against. Can I have the who's against? And that'll help me work out. So there is a debate. Good. So we now go in the order of Councillor Cordy, then Councillor Gardner has a chance to speak now or later. Then we go to the first person who put up their hand to object, which was you. And then we'll open it up to the next person who supports it, and then back to the objection, and then you. Right? We've got it? Okay, go Councillor Cordy.
Mayor, I'll just comment in relation to 173 agreements. What this actually requires is a formal process whereby conditions relating to a farm plan are actually put onto the title, so it's additional administrative and work that has to be done at the applicant's expense before they can do anything else. So it just stalls the process and back and forward, and it's just administrative nonsense in my view. And I would like to see it struck off because we've got genuine people that are wanting to move forward with an enterprise, and we shouldn't be putting unnecessary obstacles in their way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cordy. Councillor Gardner, do you wish to speak now?
Yeah, just briefly. I must admit I didn't pick that up until Councillor Cordy mentioned it. But I do agree, I do believe that is quite an onerous additional thing to put on top of people. I think they've made a commitment to do as a farm. Having a caveat of such on a title, to me, going into the future would reduce its sort of economic benefit in general terms, I suppose. And it could have a reverse effect of actually having a house with a farm and no one ever wanting to buy it. I think we just have to allow the people currently to get on with it, and they sound like they're going to commit. I don't think we need the section 37 that on that 173.
Thank you. Councillor Petrusma.
Speaking against the motion, I took on board what Mr Baldock said in his objections, and I was really happy with the farm plan. I read it today. But I wanted some more confirmation, and some of the information that the landowner gave us clarified a lot of things for me, and I was really happy to support the original motion. And one of the reasons I was happy to support that was because of the 173 agreement. The 173 agreement to me is the only legal avenue. I mean, I take on board that the applicants wish to have this as a farm, but the only way we can ensure that the house actually is tied to the farm, apart from a promise, is a 173 agreement. That's the proper legal avenue, and I'd probably seek some officer clarification on should the farm at some stage in the future become unviable. I believe there is a waiver of 173 agreement can be removed, but perhaps I can seek some clarification on that before I go any further.
In response to that inquiry, yes, section 173 can be amended, varied, removed by agreement between the parties that are subject to that 173.
Okay, so just to clarify again, the 173 agreement does tie the use of the land and the building of a house on that land to the farm. If circumstances changed, something happened, that for some reason it had to be sold on, there is an option then, if it became an unviable venture, the venture failed, to have the 173. But the only real way at this stage to tie the house and farm together is that agreement, so I don't support the amendment, I support the original application.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak?
Briefly, I agree with Councillor Petruza. The 173 agreement carries through future owners. I've got no complaint about the current applicants, and in fact it would probably, if they wanted to move on at some stage again, it is highly likely that if they've got a permaculture type thing, you would get a permaculture type fire. But the 173 is a safety net.
Councillor Lesser?
This is for our director. Well, the 173 agreements, I don't understand, but what do they allow you to do? Is this a legal 173? I know we have it regarding stormwater and stuff like that, but under the Local Government Act, what is allowed under the 173 agreement?
So the 173 agreement is under the Planning and Environment Act, so it's section 173 of the Planning and Environment Act. So the intent and most common use of a 173 is to tie a condition beyond the end of the development. So when a planning permit is issued, the conditions usually relate to the development, and the planning permit expires when that development is completed. So in this case, for example, the permit is for the construction of a dwelling,
yes,
but it's tied to the farming zone. So once the dwelling is constructed, the permit expires. As long as so during the development, we've got to meet all those conditions. The section 173 then ties the use of that dwelling to the farm management plan that's been provided to ensure that that connection between the dwelling and the farming use continues beyond the planning permit. And the other thing I'd add is, I think one of the councillors mentioned, the section 173 gets lodged on title. It's not a reflection on the current owners in any way, shape or form. It's more a protection to ensure that something that might be quite pivotal to the application continues with the land rather than the owner.
Anyone else wish to speak to this? No. Councillor Corley, right of reply.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd just say, in relation to this property and the applicants, there would be 10 or 15 small lifestyle properties within 200 metres of this property that don't have 173 agreements on it. So I'm still argue the case that a 173 agreement is an unnecessary impost on these new farmers to our community. So that's all I can do. But bottom line is putting these people at a disadvantage to their nearest neighbours, and there's a lot of them, and they're all on small properties, and they care for the land, and they're doing all the right things, but you're just putting additional impost upon these applicants. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? I think you've all spoken anyway. Thank you. No, you didn't.
Oh, just keep quiet.
Okay. All those in favour of the amended motion, which is the motion as tabled, excluding the... No?
Just the amendment.
The amendment is to remove the section.
Yeah, so the amendments... Yeah, but it is...
No, just the motion to remove the 173.
On my motion.
Okay.
Subject to that, you can make a new motion.
Okay. This is a lovely governance game to do. So what we're voting for is that the 173 motion agreement is removed from the motion. So, no? Correct? Okay. All those in favour of that? motion is passed. Good heavens. Right, now we can go back to the original motion, which, as revised, to... Right, so we had Councillor Henderson as the mover, who was... and you were the seconder.
Second again.
Right. So we now have... We'll go back to the starting motion.
Yeah, we have to vote on.
Or do we just go to the
We're in the middle of the debate.
Yep, so now.
Has anyone... So we start the whole process from the start?
You can vote.
Okay. Councillor Henderson, do you wish to speak to your motion?
No. Look, I did sing the praises of the Section 173 agreement, but I really want to see this go ahead. And as Councillor Corley says, you know, when it's all done and dusted, it'll, yes, probably get forgotten even if it is sitting on the title. So, yeah, I support it. I really urge people to pass this motion, without the Section 173.
So let me go back to just reminding me, did anyone object to this? Oh, you did.
You did ask.
No, I'm now asking, did anyone object to this? To this motion as amended? No. Okay, I'm just checking, I'm just trying to work out who needs to speak next. Okay, anyone want to speak to this now? Councillor Petrucci.
Okay. I'll support the motion. I would have preferred the 173 agreement, it's out, but I'm not going to knock the motion back. So I'd spent a lot of time reading the farm management report and was really happy to see a lot of the stuff on there, and I hope it goes really well. And having stayed on a small dairy farm in Ireland last year, I'm really looking forward to seeing how this actually progresses. So I'm not going to go against the motion. So I support it.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak?
Can I just say that I think this is going to be very well inspected properties, because all councillors are going to be driving past at regular intervals to see how it's progressing. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. There being no objection to this, I declare the motion carried. Okay. We now move to Eco 44 draft cash management policy. Page 54, we have a recommendation. Do we have a motion?
Yes, you do, Mayor. I move that the Council adopts the draft cash management policy, noting the request by the Audit and Risk Advisory Committee to rename to draft investment policy to cash management policy to rename.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Cordy. Any objections? Councillor Lesser, do you wish to speak to this?
Yeah, just for a minute. Initially, when I was elected, and there was an opening on the Audit and Risk Committee, I said, no, that's not me. But I find myself there, and it is me. And I like it, and this is one of the initiatives. I thought this was the only initiative I'd be famous for, to change the heading of something. So, but no, I like it, and it really makes a difference. And it enables council now to have a look at an investment policy. That's the beauty of changing this. It opens up the way for us to look at other avenues. That if we've got millions and millions and millions of dollars spare, we can do something with it. So that's what this enables us to do. But we don't have millions and millions and millions, but it means that we can have now a separate investment policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cordy. Anyone else wish to speak?
It's all okay.
Anyone else wish to speak? That being the case, I declare the motion carried. And the real reason we do now have a draft cash management policy is that it provides greater flexibility for B category long-term rated, A2 category short-term rated investments.
Oh, no. Max?
Yeah.
I thought you were risk averse.
It really, what this does is provide greater certainty around where our money can be invested. That is certain for people and is certain and provides risk management. So I just really wanted to emphasise we're not just tabling a draft policy for the fun of it.
No.
So it looks like the marijuana comes out.
Annual report, page 57. Can we just concentrate for the last few minutes of my last council meeting?
What, you think you're going to get out of this?
Yeah, I think I'm going to get out of these. Come on, guys. The annual report, and I'd like to really emphasise that we're not asking you to approve anything with this one. This is, we've considered it and we note it has been submitted. So, councillors, do I have a recommendation?
Yep.
As
printed.
As printed?
Yeah.
Councillor Cordy, thank you. Any objections? No? Good. Do you wish to speak?
I really like the photograph.
Oh, don't start there.
No, it's a great read. It's a great resource for anyone who wants to know what's going on in council. Great summary. Oh, she's gone. I was going to say one of our front of house staff is sitting there and she features in the photographs. I mean, you know, it's a silly thing to say. But
Beautiful
great
photo.
photographs.
Great building.
Celebrating our council and our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cordy.
Yes, Mayor, I looked through the report. It's a great report. There's a lot of interesting material in there. Just talking about photographs, there's some fantastic photos of councillors and staff in there. One of the things that bothers me a little bit about the report is there's quite a few photographs, community photographs that don't show people's faces, and I think we should be able to get beyond that in terms of the presentation of the report. But look, it's a fantastic report, and I commend it to all of our ratepayers. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Lesser.
I just want to point out to the councillors that there's two halves to this report. One is the annual report, and the other one is the financial report. So there's a financial report that goes with it, and that has your signature on it and mine. So I'm just saying that we will be looking at in the future our finances, but this is a report as tabled, and we're just going to accept that. So I just wanted to point out the two halves.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Anderson?
That's it.
No. I therefore declare the matter carried. I'd also like to point out that this is a really thorough analysis of all the work, and it's an amazing amount of work that this council and the council organisation does. We as councillors will tick off budgets, we'll tick off annual plans, and it happens. And it's happened brilliantly, it's happened innovatively, it's happened with great efficiency. I really, if you want to see what the average council covers, one, I suggest you go and sit on our front desk and just hear what our reception people have to deal with in terms of it goes from cats to major strategies to my mum's sick. It's amazing the work that we cover, the 100 services, the 100 acts under which we have all of this work done. I really thank councillors for their leadership and staff for actually enacting this. Thank you so much. I'd also like to acknowledge the perspicacity of our staff in deciding, well before the grand final, that Richmond was going to win. So, good on us. Thank you very much. Councillors. We're now moving on to, any moment now,
Mayor, can I clarify something on Echo 46 before we start on?
Yeah.
Probably per our CEO or Mr. Civic. Part 3.7 that Ms. Eager spoke to earlier, a couple of just quick clarifications on what's got written in Part 3.7 before we move this. Firstly, it says council will not receive questions relating to any planning permit, but a statement's not a question. So is that an incorrect wording, firstly? And secondly, should further information come to light only, for example, hours before the meeting, can we grant leave? If that part is left in or clarified, can we grant leave to any person to speak on the basis that if further information was to come to light and was important to be given to councillors prior to the decision to be made, is there room to grant leave to do so?
So the first part of the question was around changes to the application.
No, people can still come in.
So the first part just says not receive questions.
Yes.
But if somebody made a statement, that's not a question. So I'm just wondering if that wording is correct, firstly. And secondly, if somebody was to come up with further information on the night, is there a way that we can grant leave to hear it? Notwithstanding 3.7 says we normally wouldn't.
There's probably a question for governance, sorry, Jude, in terms of amending the policy, but I would suggest that by resolution you can accept and because it would be in contravention of the policy to a certain extent. Yeah, so, and I think by resolution you might be able to deal with that by exception. The reason that was included, that mirrors largely what a lot of councils do, and it also, the idea was the opportunity to present any information, etc., would be at that councillor briefing with the objectors and applicant present. The other thing I'd say about the issues that were raised earlier, it is absolutely correct that we have to accept all objections up until a determination is made. When we do a public notice, what we say in the public notice is that council will not make a decision before a nominated date, and so that's the minimum notice period. But if at any time we receive the trigger in the policy for objections, then absolutely we'll bring it to council and we'll arrange the briefings and all those sorts of compliance issues with the policy.
Okay. So can I just again clarify, the word questions in there, is that the right wording or should that be amended to cover discussion, questions and discussion? Perhaps Mr. CEO might be able to clarify that.
Well, councillors, that it was the intention, as was discussed with the planning staff, that the idea is to break the discussion with the community about a matter on both sides, for and against, from the night when you make a decision. So whether it's a question, whether it's a statement, or it's some form of conversation, the intention is not to permit that on the same night that you're being asked to make a decision. That's what the intent should be understood to mean.
That's correct.
And the opportunity for that is provided though through that briefing in the policy.
But, sorry Mayor, if I may, I think the other thing is that if more information comes to light, then it is an absolute expectation that Director Civic, on behalf of his staff, will be presenting to you. If we get last minute information, you will be briefed before. If we have that information in time, you'll be briefed on that information before you consider the matter. So this is not suggesting that the community has to do that, which I understand that may sometimes be of interest, but you will still get that information as provided by the director in the lead up to the meeting if he has it.
I don't think that's correct. Can we move the motion and have the debate?
Councillors, do we want to have further discussion, not as a debate?
I'm happy to move a motion with a couple of amendments to the policy.
Please do.
Okay, basically as per the recommendation, but the amendments would be part 3.3, any planning permit application not meeting the criteria contained in clause 3.1 can be called in by 2 or more councillors.
That's correct.
So the word council is removed and replaced with 2 or more councillors. For its determination, And then
For determination.
yeah, and then the words prior to are taken out. If that application has not already been determined by a senior council officer.
Yep.
And at the bottom, just to add the words, council will not receive questions or have any discussion from any person relating to any planning permit application under consideration by council during that same ordinary meeting of council. So just to clarify that any outside questions also will be allowed.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Lesser, is there any objection to that? Councillor Cordy? Okay. So we have a debate.
I really don't want to go into an amended motion, but I just, I believe putting in the word discussion in terms of members of the public speaking to council in ordinary meeting of the council, we don't enter in discussion in that they just speak to us, we don't then reply and then they tell us what they think. So maybe we could just say, oh, statements.
I'm happy to amend that from discussions to statements. Yeah. So it'd be questions or statements.
Yeah. Just discussion.
Check it out, I seconded it to make sure that's okay.
So Councillor Lesser? That's fine. Changing the word discussion to statement. Councillor Cordy's have given the whole thing, so we do have...
There's a problem with that. That's
Okay.
yes, that was... Sorry.
I'm not getting a clear debate around it.
What? I've seconded the motion. but in this one here...
Oh, so we're just debating the amendment or the whole thing?
No.
No, we now have, without any further discussion, you're not speaking yet. We have a mover, we have a seconder, we have an objector. That's where we're at. So we're now about to have the debate. With the mover starting, go for it.
Well, I'm happy not to speak too much at this stage. I'll wait to hear what the council for's objections are.
Okay, so, right, seconder?
What? Yeah, you want me to talk?
You don't have to, you can hold your...
No, look, there is some clarification. Right, I'm going to start that again.
Put your microphone on.
Oh, yeah, I'm dying here. Okay. The first thing that needs to be understood here, and this is on page 62, Council's instrument of delegation grants powers to designate officers to make decisions. There is also no law or regulation specifying the criteria and objectives and so forth, and they can make the decisions in all circumstances. So in reality, planning doesn't need to come here whatsoever. So now, so what we decided is a slight change to that, and this is the piece that gets too confusing. Under 3.1, so it says the applicant, if it's a refusal, if it's had 5 or more unresolved objections, and if the planning people say it's high community value and 1 million. So 3.7 won't even turn up because that will be dealt with by the planning officers unless 2 or more councillors call it in. So in other words, 3.7 will not apply because it's too late, it's gone, it's finished.
What do you mean? You refused?
No, but it only applies to those items. So if it's something that has got 4 objections, the council officers already made the decision. Unless prior to that, where that briefing is, there's 2 or more councillors want to call it in. So 3.7 will only apply to those 4 items under 3.1 because the others, it's gone, over, done, finished. You know.
Thank you. Councillor Cordy?
Oh, we got clarification.
Thanks, Mayor Mason.
Sorry, hang on.
In relation to this...
sorry, Councillor Cordy. I just heard the words, do we have clarification?
I don't.
What clarification are you seeking?
Oh, is what I'm saying correct? That's what I'm trying to get at. I could be wrong. But what I'm getting at here is, and I understand the intent was, but it's too, yeah. Says the CEO got a point. You're right. Go for it. Sorry.
Thank you.
So the intent of the policy in 3.1 is to identify those applications that, as a mandatory requirement, would come to council.
Yes.
And as we discussed as part of the briefings to this, council officers will provide a monthly list of all applications that are currently live, and councils can review that. And the intent of clause 3.3 is that any applications that fall outside of those mandatory requirements listed in 3.1, councillors can call in if 2 or more councillors support that proposal, and therefore effectively they then fall under the requirements of 3.1, where council officers will do the assessment and bring a council report to a formal council meeting. So that's how the clauses are written.
Which, Mayor, if I can just extend the next step, that means that 3.7 then gets triggered in all of those circumstances.
Yes, it gets triggered in those circumstances, but not in others.
Correct.
So in other words, if there's an application,
Thank you.
if there's an application and the council officers have made a decision, they've made their decision, and a week later, somebody comes along and says, I've got all this further information, it's too late.
Yep, but that's how it is now. Yeah.
No, it's not quite.
It is.
Because they
Sorry,
come
we're having a conversation. We either go we stay in debate. We've got your clarification. We're not debating that. We're now moving on to Councillor Cordy.
Thanks, Mayor Mason. Look, I have concerns about the draft document or the documents before us, and my reason for that is that what we've seen tonight is robust debate and in the council chamber about a planning matter in which the applicants and objectors had the opportunity to speak to the matter before council made a decision on that matter. And I like the system how it is, and the benefits that I see that the system has. It's got the public present, it's got the media present, it's got all everybody in the room together. Everyone can hear the debate. Now, when you take it away to a briefing session, you won't have the public present, you won't have the press present, and at a briefing session, council won't actually make a decision. They'll just hear the might hear some applicants, might hear some objectors, but there won't be a decision made. And it concerns me that is not in the public forum, whereas our existing system has it in the public forum. It works very well. We might only be we're not Melbourne City Council. We haven't got big vested interests at play, but the bottom line is everyone gets to have input, and the decision is made, right or wrong. There's appeal methods down the track, but I see it's a backward step where you separate people having that opportunity to speak to an issue, and then they don't have any input when council is going to make a decision on the matter. So I don't like the changes as they are proposed. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak?
Yes, please.
Councillor Gardner.
Okay. So my understanding is, and this is what I believe is the case, basically the mandatory referral process is pretty much the same as it is now, as it operates, except from it's going from 1 to 5. So now, at the moment, one of the outstanding objections will bring it to council. It now needs 5. In terms of what you're saying, Tony, about tonight, the robust debate, I agree. And if you look at the applications that come to us today, the subdevelopment probably wouldn't have come to us because it meets the planning framework, and I don't think there was any objections. We still would have had the Harcourt one because that was a refusal, so that wouldn't have changed. I actually think it's an improvement of the system because to be honest, the 3-minute question time, or in some ways I find it a very lip service type scenario. I have changed my mind listening to people, but it's sort of done at the last minute, and I think us actually holding a briefing session which gives everyone the opportunity and probably hopefully longer to present their arguments will make better informed decisions. So I support it.
Anyone else wish to speak?
I suppose I better speak as the mover of the motion originally. I take on board Councillor Cordy's concerns. I actually share some of them, and I wanted to hear what his reasoning was before I went any further. But I also take on board Councillor Gardner that an applicant objector meeting a couple of weeks before the council, I think in most instances would resolve most issues, and certainly councillors can still be contacted by applicants or objectors right up until the meeting. In fact, in one of the instances today, we've had emails from people in relation to matters that are on the agenda in the last day or two. So I think people still have an opportunity to speak towards something in ways other than at the council meeting. So I would support the motion. I would, however, flag that the applicant objected council briefings. If they didn't work, I'd certainly be looking at changing back to what we have now. But for now, I'm happy to support it, and I think most issues should be resolved prior to the meeting.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Okay, all those in favour of the motion? Those against? Motion is carried. Thank you. That was two. Do you wish to call the division or not? No? No, okay. Okay, moving on. Delegates' reports. Does any councillor have a delegates' report? No? Okay. We do. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry about that. Councillor Cordy.
That's fine, man. I'd just like to mention that we've got a small, we've got a farmers group in North Harcourt that meets regularly, and at our last meeting we had the CEO attend, and I'm sure it's on his list, but I'd just like to thank him formally for coming along to our meeting and fielding questions from our local farmers. Sometimes the farming sector feels like they're not getting traction with issues that they have concerns about, but it was fantastic to have the CEO make time available to come along and talk to us, and it was really appreciated, so thank you, CEO.
Thank you, Councillor Cordy. I'd like your punning there about traction. Anyone else? Chief.
Thanks very much, Councillor Cordy, and thanks for inviting me as well. I think it's yet again another one of those opportunities to hear from a group that we don't always know that they're there. So it's really great when you help us to learn about some groups out there who might be able to be a reasonable sized voice for us. That's always the challenge, of course, is trying to find a collective voice rather than a group of individual voices. So thanks very much for that. I learned quite a bit. Mayor, just one or two that I'll mention, but if I may first just say on behalf of all the staff in the organisation, thank you for your leadership over this last year, but we know it's been much longer than that, sitting in the chair as mayor. It's technically your third term. A bit over 2 years in the role. You are obviously the leader of this group, have been the leader of this group, but if I can put it this way, you've certainly been the spiritual leader of the organisation as well. Thank you. You make an enormous effort to support the staff whenever you do anything that you do, and the staff certainly know that and appreciate that, and the time that you even give to come along to all staff meetings to give your views and your thanks usually to the staff has really been appreciated by the whole organisation there. As on top of, as all the councillors see and the community sees, this long list that comes out every month. It's got a few things I do on it, but a ton of things that you do on it, month in, month out. Your workload has been extraordinary, and I really thank you that from the organisation's perspective as well, because if you're not doing it, then we have to do it, and you just don't say that. You never say no. You're always there working so hard to represent the organisation and this table. So thank you very much for that, Mayor. It's been a pleasure working with you as our Mayor. A couple of points I'll just make off the off the list. Excuse me. You'll see there's one I met with Justin Burney, as well as the Manager of Economic Development and Culture. Met with Justin. He's the project director from the Department of Jobs, Precincts and Regions. He's heading up a review of regional tourism, and I know, Mayor, you attended a launch of our new tourism website, which is a joint run with 3 other councils. It was terrific to listen to him. They've got ideas about how do you reform regional tourism groups across Victoria to get even more out of them and make sure that they're providing the benefit that our community and our councils expect from those groups. They've got work to do, but it was really nice to hear that our regional tourism group is seen as one of the really good ones that's operating, that shows what's possible to be done in regional tourism in Victoria. So I thought that was a terrific bit of feedback that we got there. So we'll wait and see what the upshot of the review is. But it was nice to hear that we're certainly seeing it in a very good light from the tourism perspective of the state. The other one I'll quickly mention there is myself and Director Civic and I met yesterday, I think, with the Castlemaine Secondary College to talk about matters of common interest, and we have so many. The principal there, you and I have met with the principal and the chair of their board many times. That's now an initiative that we'll be doing on a fairly frequent basis. I think we've agreed quarterly, Director, right? To meet with them and just talk about where's the opportunities for us to do more together. They've got lots of recreation initiatives that they want to pursue. So have we. They've got lots of arts initiatives they want to pursue. So have we. They've got lots of community-based building community initiatives they want to pursue. So have we. So there's lots of opportunity in there. It was really great to spend an hour or so with them talking about what that might be, and we'll certainly be doing that on a pretty frequent basis from here. Happy to answer questions now.
I just have to say the pity if they're not a wealthy private school, they could build a nice big arena swimming pool.
Thank you. We keep dreaming. I did an analysis of our last year of delegates' reports. I came in at an average of 20 a month, and you came in at an average of 27.
Ooh.
You beat me well and truly, and do a full-time job. A couple of things I want to mention. I attended the time capsule burial ceremony, in which 250 letters were received and were put into a time capsule which does not contain money or any grief. It's all paper, so don't go and dig it up. But it's 250 letters written by our people to the people living 100 years in the future. So they want to know if there's going to be an AFL, Macca's, chicken nuggets, whether there will still be fish in the trees, fish in the oceans, trees on the land. Yeah, well, there might well be trees under the ocean, actually. So fish in the oceans, trees on the land. Will we have solved climate change? It's a really interesting thing about what are we asking of the 100 years. What have we achieved? What's the challenges for us? I also went to the social housing seminar last Thursday, and there is a real issue, as we all know, around housing affordability, particularly in Castlemaine, but also in other parts of our Shire, which has a real significant impact on a whole lot of people. Some of that, particularly for people who are vulnerable, who are trying to get away from domestic violence, who are poor. It's not a nice thing to listen to some of those stories. but they're stories that we have to listen to. This community is doing what this community does so well, is exploring whole of community responses to that. There's still more discussion on that. There will still be more people coming to it. So thank you. We've done the notice of motion. There's no urgent special business, but we do have a confidential report to look at. So we have to, I'm sorry, clear the room. It's not a big, we will have a motion around that.
Yeah.